Now let's discuss the biological safety hazard. As we discussed that hazards are of three types: biological, chemical, and physical. So let's talk about the biological safety hazards first. Uh, there are more than 40 different pathogenic bacteria which are very commonly associated with very common diseases or hazard that do take place due to consumption of such food. Um, but I would just highlight some of them which are very commonly associated with the disease or with food poisoning incidences. So these are Salmonella, E. coli, especially its strain O157H7. This has been implicated in many cases of food infection. Then we have Listeria monocytogenes, Clostridium perfringens, Clostridium botulinum, Staph aureus, and Campylobacter jejuni. These are the very important and major pathogens, but as I said that they are not the only one. There are more than 40 food borne pathogens that are there in food, and they cause serious biological hazard in case of food. And they, at least, they would be causing the food poisoning incidences, and mostly, as you might be aware, that most of the food poisoning, the symptoms they would include headache, muscle pain, nausea, fatigue, chills or fever, and stomach pain or abdominal pain, vomiting, and diarrhea. So these are the generalized symptoms of food poisoning, or generalized symptoms that are observed after ingestion of food having these pathogens. But these outcomes can be even more serious than these food poisoning, and they would depend upon the kind of population that we are talking about. There have been fatal incidences. There have been number of deaths as well, and it would depend upon the vulnerable part of the population. The normally vulnerable part of populations are infants and older people, pregnant women, and people who are immunocompromised. So it would mean that in these vulnerable people in a population, they would be more vulnerable. And if they consume any of these pathogens, the results can be more serious in the vulnerable population as compared to the rest of the population. So, if we talk about what food are generally implicated in case of food poisoning incidences, so you might know that these are normally meat and poultry, egg, seafood, milk and dairy products, fruits and vegetables, and low acid canned food. As you know, that mostly they are very perishable food products. They are not very acidic. They have got a neutral or near neutral pH, so they actually are more favorable for food poisoning incidences, and these pathogens are happy to grow in these foods, so they can be implicated in many food safety incidences or food poisoning. Another category of biological hazards other than bacteria is viruses. Uh, so food actually, it can be a medium for the spread of these viruses. So viruses may not grow like bacteria in order to multiply within food, but they can be, the food can be a carrier for these viruses to actually travel from one patient to another healthy people and then causing disease in them. So if we look at the examples, they are hepatitis A and E. They generally use food as a medium for their growth. Similarly, there are Norwalk group of viruses. They are again responsible for many health incidences world over. And rotavirus, they are again responsible for many of the diseases related to GI tract. So these viruses are important biological hazards that find their way into food and then they spread uh, using food as a carrier. If we talk about the third category of biological hazards in food, it would be parasites. So there are various kind of parasites. They are implicated in many of the food safety incidences. For example, they can be protozoa, Entamoeba histolytica. This again causes around 55,000 deaths world over, and more than 1 million, sorry, more than, yeah, 1 million cases of spread of these entamoeba or these parasites, and that cause a lot of disease world over. Similarly, Giardia, Lamlia, or Cryptosporium pavum, these are the examples of other protozoan species that do create serious biological hazards in case of food. If we talk about certain worms like parasitic worms, these are Ascarius lambricoides, Taenia solium, and Trichinella spiralis. They are again the kind of worms that do get into food and from food into the intestine, and they cause a lot of disease and fatalities in humans as well as in animals as well. So these were the three examples of biological hazards that are present in food, and they can have serious implication in case the food is consumed, having the larva or eggs of these worms, or having the cells of these protozoans or bacteria or viruses. They can spread from there and create serious hazards in human population as well as in animals as well.